You know how Brazilian athletes have, well, they go by one name, right? So, Pelé, Socrates, Oscar, Nene. Okay, right? Like this singular, singular name. An effable, ineffable name. How does that line go? Anywho, just the one name, like Madonna. Okay, there's a new name on the scene, a Brazilian athlete. Tiffany. Tiffany. You hear the name Tiffany, and perhaps you think, uncharitably, oh, that's a stripper's name. Listen, dude, there are real people named Tiffany. It's not a stripper's name. Although in this case, the reality of the name could definitely be called into question. Tiffany is a transsexual athlete playing in the women's SuperLeague or volleyball in Brazil.
On one side, the Caucaia team. On the other, the team Supergirls. Here there's just one small difference. You are women, and you are trans women. That's to say, all women.
For the first few months on hormones, I had a lot of muscle pains, my shoulders would hurt a lot, and I realized it's all my male muscle going away. It was pretty challenging at first, just having all my muscle basically melt off my body. I definitely can't jump as high as I used to.
First, we have to respect people for their history, for their story, their beginning, their difficulties, so that then we can come with a judgment. Today, whether Tiffany makes a difference or not in a match, as there have been games in which teams have managed to keep her contained, take her out of the game. And then there were, like, the last game where she made 39 points against Praia. Well, today, I can't agree in the fact of her participating in the feminine league. For a lot of time, her entire puberty, she developed in the masculine sex. So today I can't agree with that. So then, was it difficult? No, it was peer-to-peer. So was it the same? Yeah, it was the same. So girls, you came out on top, but it was pretty hard, right? Oh yeah, it was very complicated.
All right. So I've done videos before about how the acceptance of trans athletes into women's sports, it signals the death knell of women's sports, right? All we have now are human sports, we still have women's sports, but as this trend continues, we will just have women's sports because no one's going to have the courage to say no. Of course, no one's going up, right? No born women are becoming men and then excelling in men's sports. But the opposite is happening. So we're just going to end up with volleyball and no natural women playing. We're just going to end up with basketball, sprinting, whatever, and no natural women competing. I've done videos about that before. Let's talk about Tiffany and sports and Brazil and whatever. Okay, so young man born into poverty, extreme poverty, it seems. Did pretty well with volleyball. Volleyball is a club sport in Brazil. Brazil kind of has a European model of clubs. And was good enough to be on some small club teams as a teenager, etc. Became a professional, but very quick. It was unremarkable, completely unremarkable. Played for several years, just kind of bounced around from team to team, ended up in Europe. Okay. Before he came back to Brazil to play in the feminine Super League, he was in Belgium in their third division. I don't know how you make a living in the third division in Belgium, but as I said, these are clubs and people pay dues and you participate, so at least room and board this guy had, right? So he competed. I'm not sure exactly. There was a transition period when he was in transition and hormones were changing, etc. But he came back to Brazil, and his testosterone levels had been low enough for long enough that he could begin playing. Came into this team, Bauru, well into the season. Okay, so before Christmas, he played 3 matches. Okay, again, someone who rated the 3rd division in Belgium is now playing with women. This is before Christmas, played 3 matches, and now the season has begun again after Christmas. Okay, in 3 matches, he became the leading scorer of the league by average. Okay, so other women had been playing and had been scoring points, etc. But the highest average per game, per set, was Tiffany's. Okay. First game back from the Christmas break, Tiffany plays in a 5-set match against the best team in the league, scores 39 points, breaking the record. No one, so the previous record was 37 points. Some great previous player had scored 37 points in one match. Tiffany scored 39, 4th game into this league. Now, it's causing a lot of turmoil in Brazil. I mean, like, Tiffany is now a household name. Because the governing body of the league is not happy about what's happening, about the fact that this extremely mediocre professional, like one of those players who decides, this happens in every sport, right? One of those players who decides they'd rather keep playing their sport at an extremely low level than go get a real job, which is a completely legitimate choice. But that's the level he was at, right? Now, he's absolutely dominating this women's league. And it's generating a lot of polemic, as we would say in Portuguese, right? There's a lot of turmoil. Because born as a man. I mean, it's not just about hormone levels, right? I mean, we've seen this in MMA especially. People's faces getting crushed because they go up against someone who was born as a man, regardless of what current hormone levels are. Bone structure, muscle density, 20, 30 years of this, and boom, there's no way a woman can compete with that. And so the governing body of this league is saying they're going to revisit this and see what they can do to, there's some pretty open hostility. One of the fascinating aspects about this for me, though, is one of the cool things about the United States is that a lot of people they don't do what the UN or the world community says or thinks is best. But sorry about that. My phone ran out of memory. Brazil has sort of a neurosis about doing what the UN says. If the UN says something about how education should be, how family should be, then Brazilian legislators rush to make that law. And it's enough of an argument to say that the UN thinks this is a good thing to do. It's really distressing. And it's distressing to some Brazilian thinkers and people, but the automatic setting for 95% of Brazilians is, the UN says so, great. The international community says so, okay. So, this is affecting this volleyball situation because they're just kind of doing what the international governing bodies have said is standard. And by so doing, they're completely disrupting league play and causing chaos and consternation. So that's just a thing that really gets my goat. Pause to sigh. Okay. That's really what the point of this video is. I mean, like I said, I've done videos before about the death of women's sports. And, we all know what happens when people born as men compete against women. It's mediocrity becomes greatness. I mean, the Australian women's national team lost 7-0 in a World Cup warm-up a couple of years ago to a bunch of 14-year-old boys. There's just no comparison. But what's really, really distressing is the atmosphere of fear and social pressure that forces people into making decisions that they're clearly uncomfortable with. And when they talk to the press, they have to dance around. A lot of the athletes are not happy about this, but the vocalization of this is relatively minimal. A lot of retired athletes are speaking out, but very, very few athletes are actually competing or saying anything because they're afraid of sanctions. Goodness gracious. Now, there was a tiny little bright spot in this game where Tiffany broke the record. They actually lost the match. It's a team sport. But a volleyball kind of limits the influence one player could have. Imagine if this was basketball, right? I mean, what would stop this person from taking a good shot every single time? I'll tell you, nothing would stop them. Okay? I mean, volleyball, they're just, obviously you can't, you're limited to your side of the court. But then also you're completely dependent on your teammates. You can't just hand the ball to someone and say, go to work, right? You need to take the serve well. You need to get a good pass to the setter. The setter needs to get a good set to you. Even with all those limitations, I mean, just the power and the leaping ability of this man, this mediocre professional, is completely overwhelming. Again, the point is all this social pressure that is influencing people's decisions. And it's going to bankrupt the sport. And it's going to bankrupt academics. And it's going to bankrupt philosophy. And it's going to bankrupt politics. This sort of extreme hypocrisy in identity politics is going to bankrupt society. And it's distressing to see these signs in sports. Sports seems like it should be one of those arenas where you can have clarity, right? Isn't that the appeal of sports? Is that, conflict in life is so complex and difficult to manage, but sports kind of give us a standard of excellence and a goal to perform and clear rules and clear objectives. And it's what appeals to us as athletes and what appeals to us as spectators. But even in the clearest of areas, complete moral hypocrisy and bankruptcy. This has been a video of woe. Because culturally, I think the solution is for Christians to have robust alternatives. But really, that's not going to happen with volleyball leagues, right? We can have robust alternatives in the arts, robust alternatives in academia, robust alternatives in politics. But sports, no, not going to happen. Alas, alack, and well a day. The peace of Christ be with you.